So, Tony, would you mind to tell me a little bit about yourself and your background and how you found me?
Not at all. I was a music therapist for 18 years. And during that time, I worked with kids with various disabilities and abilities. And I found you on Facebook advertisement. I'm not sure if you posted that or how it came about, but I clicked on it and it looked really interesting. And then I kind of put it away for a year or two in the back of my mind. And then a couple parents of the kids that I worked with at the schools asked if I'd be interested in teaching them piano. And this was after I had been I transferred to another school, so it would have been appropriate for me to either teacher, a piano teacher.
So these were music therapy clients?
These were music therapy clients, yes.
Okay.
And so I kind of thought in my mind, maybe. And then I remembered your program, and I looked for it again. I remember doing a search on it. I don't know if I looked on Google or whatever, but I found it. And then I got in contact with you somehow through email, and picked up books 1, 2, and 3 for 3 of my former music therapy students. And we began.
That's great. That's terrific. Well, first and foremost, I'm glad it gave you the opportunity to continue working with these clients because, correct me if I'm wrong, we say kids, but they're almost adults now. The individuals that you and I have gotten to work with together through this program, you've known them since they're quite young. Is that correct?
That's right. Since they were in kindergarten.
That's great. That's great. So you can keep on working with them into their 20s and maybe even beyond.
Yeah.
That would be a real gift. That's terrific.
Yep. They're in their mid to late teens now. So.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. And, I appreciate you bringing me into a few of those lessons so that I could meet a few of the students and also work with them. We got to work as kind of joint teachers, which was a real pleasure.
It's been great. Yes,
yeah, the kids that you've been working with, they're doing really, really well. They're both in book 4, which I'm really proud of them for. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience using the program? Let's take the 2 individuals. We'll call them D and, oh my God, I'm blanking here.
K.
D and K.
Okay.
And sorry about that. We'll call them D and K. And just tell me a little bit about them and what the process was like.
Okay. Well, let's start with D because that was kind of a different situation. I had worked with a music therapy intern who was creating a piano program herself. I don't believe I told you this before. But she was targeting specific age group, and that was like 10, 11, 12 to kind of research this piano program that she was developing with another person. And I said, hey, I know somebody whose mom really wants him to take piano lessons. Let's get you in touch. So she actually worked with Dee for the first year on this totally separate program. And I don't have a clue how it went, to be honest. I mean, I think it went okay, but again, it was just an experiment with the intent of she would eventually kind of give him to me to work with.
Gotcha.
So, and that's when we started Occupational Octaves. Yeah.
So with the program that you were working with, this is the Fundamentals Equals Flow podcast. So we're always going to be going back to fundamentals. And my question is always this: with the other program that you were working with, were the students able to look at a piece of music and know exactly which note to play, which finger to use, and how many beats to hold for?
I can tell you when he started, I did not carry over anything that the other music therapists did. So I can't speak much of that program, but I can tell you that he was not able to read music, know where his fingers go, and how long to play it. So,
well, who could blame him? Music is an incredibly complicated language to get through. Working with traditional music notation is a serious, serious challenge. And I always tell people, I've had a number of experiences where a student comes out of adapted lessons able to play something. And then when you try to move on to the next song, it doesn't work out too well. And teachers will say, well, I thought he could read. But music is as complicated as driving a car. And there's no such thing as he knows how to drive a car, but he doesn't know how to use the gear shift. Or he knows how to drive the car, but he doesn't know how to use the brake. You need to know how to do everything in order to have a successful experience behind the wheel. And I think the piano is a very similar thing, unless you're just talking about somebody learning one song or two songs. But in terms of empowerment, we need to have those basics of which note to play, which finger to use, and how long to hold for. So now where are your clients at in terms of being able to read using occupational octaves?
Now they are able to, they've got their rings on their fingers and they're able to look at pretty much any new piece of occupational octaves music and play it.
That's awesome. I always love hearing that. Cool. So how about the other student, Kay?
So Kay, I kind of started with him in a kind of like not in a traditional teaching setting, but I did kind of go over the basics of music. And I remember the first couple lessons, I was talking about the highs and lows, pitch and tempo, fast and slow. I was, I was telling him, trying to describe the basic fundamentals of music, of what I thought would be good. He kind of just looked at me like, okay.
Yep. Like, what am I supposed to do with that now?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So, but when we dove into the occupational octaves, it was like, oh my gosh, why didn't I just start this way? So it just came easy. He was really willing to. Not all three of my students were willing to wear the rings. He was, and always is, willing to wear them. Whether it's tactile defensiveness or whatever is causing that, but yeah, it was very easy once we started the occupational octaves program.
Awesome. So did it make you feel after a little while of working with it like you were just in a normal music curriculum, just using a different language?
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
Great. So, Tony, one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to interview you in particular is because of your dual background. You have a background as a music educator and as a music therapist. So that gives you a wide range of people that you could help me communicate a few ideas with. Mm-hmm. What's it like to run this program as a music therapist? And of course, I ask that with the lens on the idea of non-musical goals. Because of course, as a music therapist, you're not seeking music first, you're seeking development first.
Right. In that regard, the non-musical goals that we have came really easily for me. I mean, you were able to kind of put it for me like in a nutshell, so to speak, so that I could like a focus. So we can get into that in a little bit. But overall, I mean, the music therapy end of it, I just was able to work with these kids kind of easily in terms of not worrying about if they could play Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, in its entirety. I'm not worried about that as much. I'm more worried. Well, not worried. That's not the right word, but I was more focused, I think, on building self-confidence and just being overall engaged in something that brings them joy and success.
Awesome. So would you recommend this program to other music therapists?
Yes, I would, and I have.
Oh, cool. Thank you. All right. So I do have a couple of more questions. But
for
before
me?
For you,
for
yeah,
me?
you're the star of the show today. But before we do those questions, I actually want to bring what I normally do at the end to the middle today, because I really want to dig into a couple of points related to the flow state. because everything that we do through occupational octaves is really geared to get a student into a state of flow where there's great connectivity between the instructions, the actions, the repetition, and there's a real full concentration. Now, I've been talking to you about the 9 dimensions of flow since we started working together, and I'd like to go through them with you for just a moment and discuss them in terms of the students that you're working with right now. So, you're going to tell me if your student is experiencing each factor. So the first dimension of flow is a challenge skill balance. That means you're always able to give your student material that's not so hard that it creates anxiety, nor so easy that it creates boredom. Have you been able to get there?
Yes.
Cool. Number 2 is action awareness merging. Action awareness merging means that the action that a student has to take and the awareness of having to do it merge into one so that you have an autonomous action. And what I always tell people that's just like is when you're driving a car and the light turns green and your foot moves over to the gas without even thinking about it.
I would say definitely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Number 3 is clear goals. Would you say D and K and your other students have clear goals when they sit down with the rings on?
Yes, they do.
Excellent. Number 4 is unambiguous feedback. And unambiguous feedback comes out in the world of music with a student being able to recognize their own mistakes.
So are they able to recognize their own mistakes?
With songs that they know.
Yes.
Great.
And that's they display that by going, Kay will say, let me try again.
Excellent.
They'll go back or they'll play the right note. Self-correcting.
Cool.
So
yeah, self-correcting is great. That's always a great goal to have. All right. Number 5 is a sense of concentration. Do you find that your students are able to concentrate on the task at hand?
100%. Yes.
Excellent. I like hearing that. Number 6 is a sense of control. Do you feel that the students are in control when they're playing?
Yeah.
Good.
I do.
Good. Yeah. We always have to kind of hop in and help them get into further control and maximize the situation, which is what we were trying to do with helping D round his fingers out and gain even more control of being able to use the piano properly. But overall, it sounds like he's in control. Okay, so those 6 dimensions of flow that we just went through are what I call the dimensions of responsibility, the things that have to be going right in order to experience the rewards of a flow state. And as I note in the paper that I published, and is noted in many, many other research papers about people being in a state of flow, there are some really, really incredible benefits to it. But to put them in kind of scientific terms, one is a loss of self-consciousness. And that doesn't mean being knocked out cold. That means that you're separated from your stress and from your anxiety and from your thoughts, and you're able to just let go and kind of let things be.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're asking if
yeah, I'm asking.
Yes,
do you think that your students are experiencing that? And I have to ask you, do you think that they're experiencing that? Because usually flow studies have a testimonial-based response, but we can't exactly rely on the testimonials of certain students. I know I have many students who wouldn't be able to provide for me a reliable testimonial, unfortunately. So I'm asking you really, what's your take on it? Do you think that he's waiting for the time to come to an end, or do you think that he's relaxed and moving forward gently and not stressed?
Well, there's definitely a relaxation to it, and I can see where they feel like I feel like the time flies. So
yeah,
we talked about that once before, but it's kind of like, oh my gosh, a half hour went by already. And actually sometimes we go over 5 minutes if we're working on the song and really focused. So yeah.
That's great. Well, you actually just brought up the next dimension of flow, which is a transformation of time, where you can't really tell if you've been doing something for 2 hours or for 20 minutes or longer or shorter. There's that disconnection with what's going on in a good way, in a very positive way.
Okay. Then yeah.
So you answered that question already.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then the final dimension of flow is what we call an an autotelic experience, which means an experience from within. Now, that also translates to having a sense of euphoria. There's usually serotonin and dopamine that is increased in the body during those times, very low levels of cortisol. And that's also related to a very low stress and very high relaxation while you're still accomplishing something. Would you say that the students that you're working with have moments where they're potentially experiencing euphoria?
Yeah, and there are a couple of things that give evidence of that. You know, I don't see these students look at me and smile a lot, but that happens. It happens frequently after they've played a song and they're successful with it, and I give them praise, yeah, and they just are beaming.
That's great.
And the other thing is they want to come back the next week. So that's all positive to me.
I agree. And in this field, we know we have a lot of students that when they do something one week, well, it's not even in this field. It's with kids in general that they'll want to do something one week, and then the next week they put up a fight with mom and dad about it, and they don't want to do it, and they don't want to try. And there seems to be very little resistance from many students when using this program, which I'm very, very proud of.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like we have a nice little grip on the 9 dimensions of flow, which is our underlying goal of all of these different fundamental issues that we handle, like posture, like positioning, like round fingers, and so on and so forth. What do you think about maybe the idea that you get to experience flow as a teacher?
I love it. Yeah,
do you think that those 9 dimensions apply to you as well?
I do. Are you going to ask me all 9 again so I can think about it?
No, that's okay. I think people have the idea.
But yeah.
Well, I mean, we could do it quick. Challenge, skill, balance. Not so hard that it creates anxiety, nor easy that it creates boredom.
Yeah.
Action, awareness, merging.
Yep.
Clear goals.
Yes.
Unambiguous feedback. Sense of concentration.
Definitely.
Sense of control.
Most of the time.
Loss of self-consciousness.
Yes.
Transformation of time.
Definitely.
Yeah. Autoletic experience.
Yeah.
All right. Very, very good. I love it.
For sure.
I love it. Okay, so is there anything that you would like to note about using this program and about the idea of seeking out a flow state experience for students with special needs?
Well, the flow state experience is kind of a new thing to me. I first heard of it just watching one of your videos doing an instruction workshop. And so then I got into it. I'm like, why haven't I ever heard of this? I was like, this is great because, you know, piano was my major in college, and these things were happening to me. And nobody ever said anything about it. But I could totally relate with each of those things. So, boy, I hope I'm not going off on a tangent, but
no, yeah. You know, it's a very personal experience for everybody to go through, and it's also a bit of an epiphany when you realize, oh, I've been doing this the entire time. This is what my teacher actually prepared me to be able to do. I'm so thankful for the research of Dr. Shinsek Mihai because of it. You know, one of the goals that I have, along with bringing the flow idea to the special needs community, is that the flow seeking task, whether it be at the piano, at a chessboard, on a yoga mat, whatever it may be, I think that most of us are actually flow teachers using music or chess or yoga as the medium to get there. And when you realize that that's the real goal of everything that you're doing and why you're putting in all this work and why, you know, your teacher making you go through drills and scales over and over to build up your skills had such great value in life for us as adults, all comes down to getting to experience the flow state.
Yeah.
And, you know, you keep on talking about how your students actually want to come back the following week. The rewards that motivate you to return and try something harder is actually one of the bedrocks of a flow state. And you actually brought up how your students smile at you. An increase in activity of your zygomaticus major muscle, which is your smiling muscle, is another hallmark of being in a state of flow. So it almost gets cheesy with all the unbelievable level of benefit that could come out of being in that flow state. But it's very, very true, and it's very, very motivating. And I guess what I'd like to know is, do you think that the students that you've been working with would have been able to experience these flow state factors and perhaps the actual flow state if you were to continue to use traditional music to get them to the things that they're playing now, the two-hand scales, Mozart's Air, the full versions, the 2-octave versions of When the Saints Go Marching In and Working on the Railroad and Star Spangled Banner? Do you think they would have gotten to experience that flow cycle through traditional notation?
Here's my answer, Lee. This is my answer, and I think this will answer the question. We probably wouldn't be continuing lessons at this point. We probably would have gone 1 or 2 years and be done.
Yeah. And you might not have even been reading music halfway through those 1 or 2 years. You might have tried to just develop some patterns and repeat the patterns and maybe play along with the patterns. But that leaves the student completely dependent on the teacher. Now, if you were to open up Occupational Octaves, we're in the beginning of book 4 now. If you opened up to the middle of book 4 and you just opened it up and had D or K put the rings on and you walked away, do you think that they would be able to independently play a few pages with the right notes, the right fingers, and the right beats?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So independence is one of the big factors that come out of this style of teaching, which is something that I'm very, very proud to have as part of everything with Occupational Octaves. And then, of course, if they play it over and over, you have the opportunity for somebody to experience a flow state who may not be able to bring themselves there independently, which is, again, just something really, really huge. We've both been working in the special needs field for a very, very long time. And unfortunately, the research shows that the levels of cortisol and the levels of depression in the world of autism, in the world of special needs, is very, very high. And we need things to combat that. And it can't be combated with things that are dependent completely on other people. Self-reliance, even if you just get to dabble in it, is one of those huge, huge life goals that we all have. And at the piano, the students that we're working with get to be a bit self-reliant.
Let me tell you just a little quick story about Kay related to this. So since we started Occupational Octaves, he has been on his own, and his grandmother and mother tell me that he's looking at a computer. They don't know what it is, if it's a YouTube video, but it's music related, and he will write letters. They're not necessarily color coded, but he does have the black dots, for flats and sharps. So
right.
I know that it's related to what he's been learning through Occupational Octaves. And so that's like an independent step for him to kind of create something that he's hearing. And then sometimes he hasn't done it lately. Obviously with this Zoom stuff going on, he hasn't either, but he'll bring those pieces of music and he'll put it on the piano and he'll want to play it.
That's so awesome.
So it's been great.
And that's textbook self-expression right there, which is, again, a non-musical goal. One of the big things that we could work toward. And, I've had a couple of students where I show up and there's stacks of papers with colored letters and boxes all over the place. And it's awesome. It's so awesome to see.
It's a great feeling when they're doing that.
Yeah. And, it's unfortunate that there are not an unlimited number of places where that self-expression and that independence and that performance could come out, but it's coming out now with D and K, and that's just absolutely awesome. So with independent success, there's a reduction in failure. And I have some personal experience in that realm of things because I myself, I was diagnosed with attention deficit. I had an IEP growing up. And when you're on that side of things, failure looms very, very large. And there's just such a great deal of it. And after a while, you could really disconnect from a number of things because it just hurts after a bit. It's just a painful thing that you're always being corrected on the different things that you're doing. And music was the one place where other than when I was with my teacher and she was drilling me hard on different exercises and skills to develop and songs to perfect and round fingers and dynamics and staccatos and phrases and everything. But it was the one place where I was able to be successful. And I can't tell you what that did for me in terms of developing into a person with some purpose in my own life, because I was not on a very positive path. Unfortunately, I dealt with some major injuries growing up that kept me out of school for most of 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, and 8th grade. So I wasn't developing alongside my peers. And then I would have to show up and try to be on par with everybody. And it just wasn't working. And again, there was a lot of disconnection with it. But I also knew undoubtedly that out of my fingers can come this music. And that I always had that no matter what. It was always something that I could go to and I could rely on, and always know that there was a purpose for me through that. And I didn't really have many others. So when I hear about stories like D and K, especially with what you were discussing with K getting to play in front of his mother and his grandmother independently, and then getting to take out markers and write up his own music by watching it and then translating it into the occupational octaves language and lingo, bringing purpose through music is something that is just so overwhelmingly important. And it's the reason why music is in every single school, although unfortunately budgets are getting cut and music is being lost in certain programs. And, we're very proud to provide a platform in which the piano could be brought directly into the special needs classroom and music can continue as a goal-reaching mechanism. But music is purpose, because you end up getting into those flow states. You get there independently, you get there accurately, you get there with all that unambiguous feedback. You can't fake it. You can only play the music right or wrong, or I guess you could make it right enough. Certain mistakes that you make might sound good, and I think a lot of music gets written actually by people making mistakes that don't sound so bad. But when I hear you discuss your experiences with the students that you work with, and I think about my own background and the challenges that I faced and how music really helped me rise up, I think it's a wonderful thing that D and K and all the other students that you'll work with in the future get to have a holistic and wholesome music experience that could last a long, long time. There's no reason for occupational octaves to be something that's in their lives for a couple of months or a couple of years. These guys could be playing into their 20s, into their 30s, into their 40s and beyond, which is, I know it's great because I know it's the same thing that my teacher provided for me. And I know what she provided for me was just on another level. It was more than I ever could have asked for.
You're very fortunately, you mentioned, that not everybody has that. So I think you did anyway.
What's that?
I think you mentioned that not everybody has that kind of experience with a teacher or music teacher. I think there's a lot of
the luck that I had with having Diane as my teacher is something that I'll never be able to thank her enough and put it into strong enough words. She taught me to teach when I was 15. I'm 38 now. It means I'm 23 years into my music education career. I'm a veteran of this game before even turning 40, which is great. She gave me work when I was young and purpose, and something that I could really strive with. But yeah, not everybody gets that lucky to have a teacher of the level that that Diane was. And here's one of the things, and I'll tie it into something that you brought up in a conversation that we had recently. When you're a kid with whatever level of special needs you want to say that I had, I have a tough time looking at it as special needs, knowing the struggles that many of my students experience, and I don't feel right combining the ideas, because compared to people that have to deal with severe symptoms and levels of autism, my life is a walk in the park, as much as there have been struggles. But when you have deficiencies, sometimes you keep on trying and trying and trying, and you're okay with the failure. But when you get to a point where you're not okay with the failure, you're always looking for ways out of it. And you, quite frankly, you find yourself BSing. And to teachers and parents out there, I'll tell you that even though your son, daughter, or your student may have a diagnosis and some really, really challenging limitations, I would bet my bottom dollar that they also have the ability to manipulate situations and convince you that they can't do things that they can do, which is something that I know I engaged in a lot with my family. And I know I drove them a bit crazy because I was very capable of things, but there was so much failure that was already going on behind my everyday life that I chose to avoid and just kind of BS a bit. And Diane was the one person who was just hearing none of it. She was hearing none of it. She was accepting none of it. And after a handful of years with her, I'd look up and in my mind, I'd be ready to give the BS as to why I didn't practice, or I did practice, really, I did practice when I knew very well I didn't. But she called out all of it, because when you're at the piano, the proof is really in the pudding. If you put in the work and practice, the muscle memory patterns will come out of your fingers. The melodies will come out of your fingers, and they'll be to a point where your teacher only needs to do basic corrections as opposed to sit there and teach you something from scratch.
Yeah.
So with that lesson in the background, I wrote in book 3 of the program to feel free to frustrate your students, because learning to play music is frustrating. And if you see frustration, that doesn't mean you're giving them something too difficult. That might mean that you just need to try something over and over until you get it. And if you have a student that's, let's say, nonverbal and hyperactive and also prone to mistakes, and like me, at a point where they're not interested in a situation where mistakes are going to happen because they're exhausted of mistakes. I know what that feels like. It's an awful, awful feeling. The best thing that you could do is to be tough with your students and to have them repeat things over and over and over. And when the arms are flailing and the drama begins, no, I can't. No, I can't. I want that. I want water. I want a snack. And just the onslaught of anything but I'm gonna do this again, and I'm gonna do it until I get it right comes out, is really when the Diane factor kind of kicks in for me.
Yeah.
And I remember how she called me out on everything. And if I'm working with a student where the let's say frustration tolerance is low, and that the cortisol level is really going to raise if you have somebody try something too many times, okay, we'll back off. But that's not everybody. And there are many, many students out there that are so much more capable than they let on to know. And using occupational octaves to kind of bust through that is so reasonable, because if the student can match the colors and the letters and play the note, there's just no excuse. We're going to try it over and over until you get the pattern right. If we discover, let's say there's a neurological issue, and because of that neurological issue, muscle memory patterns won't develop. Okay, fine. Then we're not going to expect the muscle memory patterns to develop. But that's not going to be everybody. And most of the students that we've come across, even though you might have a situation where there are severe, severe complications and severe issues to deal with, if it doesn't affect color and letter matching, we could really take them far, and we could really help them see more within themselves than they ever knew was there, just like Diane did for me, as both training me as a musician and as a classical piano player and as a teacher.
Definitely. Well, I'm glad you're bringing this up, Lee, because it doesn't, we started like, not every lesson is a walk in the park. So, there are frustration levels that we have to kind of work around. And
absolutely.
So yeah, different issues. But that might be for a different podcast.
When Allie and I were first working together, he was able to play individual notes without a problem. But when it came time to teach him chords and he had to push on 2 notes together, we had a terrible, terrible time trying to communicate the idea. And I would go hand over hand and take his hands and say, push them down together. Just like I was showing you, you use the ta as a bit of a setup and the together as execute and do the action. So I'd go hand over hand, but inevitably every time he would do them separately. He always told us 2 different notes. If we had a 3-note chord, he would see it as 3 notes. So we were going on weeks and weeks and weeks of me trying everything that I could think of to explain it to him, getting hand over hand. And I was getting frustrated. I was getting emotional about it because I knew he was completely and totally capable of pushing on 2 notes at the same time. He was totally capable of reading this, but for some reason or another, there was just a block there. So probably about 2 months into working through this, I was at the edge. I was ready to just give up. And I went like this. What do I want to hear? Just like that. And I sat back dejected. And those are the words that came out of my mouth. And all of a sudden, he pushes them down together. So from that point forward, if I ever had to prompt him to play a chord, I wouldn't say push them together. I'd say, what do I want to hear? And then boom, play them together. 4-note chord. What do I want to hear? Boom, you play the 4-note chord together. And it's just a little lesson in not only are you going to frustrate your students, you're going to be frustrated, but stick with it because things will evolve, things will come out, and amazing things will happen, especially when you're able to combine the complexity of playing music with the simplicity of the color letter matching program. You get to focus on so many different things at the same time and therefore accomplish incredible goals. And, I encourage anybody to go on to the Occupational Octaves YouTube channel, take a look at the Alley playlist, and you'll see his performances. He's amazing. He's amazing. And he plays large chords all the time, and he plays fundamentally proper piano with the right notes, the right fingers, and the right beats. And, that was when we were at the edge of giving up on something.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great story.
Oh, it was truly amazing.
One of the things I did when I was researching your program, other than going to your website, is I was watching your YouTube videos, and I just found, oh my gosh, this guy's either a music therapist or he really knows what he's doing. And that was the first time I realized, oh, he's doing more than just teaching music here or teaching how to play the piano. That's when I was like, this could be great. And you'd asked earlier for stories, and I just want to say, when these parents asked for piano lessons for these kids, not all of them, I didn't have this feeling for all of them, but there was 1 or 2 that was like, I don't know, this is, during music therapy, I could play the piano, but they didn't want anything to do with it, so it was like, I don't think they're going to want to touch the piano, much less learn a song. And now they're playing songs, and at the end of each year, except for this one, we're doing piano recitals. So they've gone from starting occupational octaves, just simple songs, to learning more complex songs and performing them in front of their friends and family. And what a rewarding experience that has been. So
I love the recital factor. So when the program, once I realized that I had a new language of music, the entire idea was, let's replicate everything that Diane provided for me, top to bottom, as much as I possibly could. And of course, the end game with something like that is the recital, just like I used to perform in when I was young, and getting to run those recitals and getting to watch the kids play and then take the bow after and then go sit with their family and seeing the gleaming smile on mom and dad's face. That's what it's all about at the end of the day. As musicians, you and I have been able to be connected to our musical ancestors. We've been able to be connected to Beethoven and Bach and Mozart and everybody, and Strauss and the whole group of unbelievable composers. And there's a reason why those songs have lasted so far into our culture. They could have gone away by now. A million things have gone away by now. But we still know Fur-Elise. We still know Beethoven's Fifth. We still know Blue Danube. We still know these songs because they leave indelible effects on our souls. And the idea that the individuals that we work with get to be exposed to and experience the great, great, great music that everybody loves and everybody strives to be able to perform themselves is something that I think is just awesome about the type of work that we do. And it's part of why I made the curriculum with so much classical music in it, because, and this is another thing that we've brought up before, we're kind of rock and metal guys. If I get to do one thing when this whole quarantine is finished, it's to go see Pearl Jam at Madison Square Garden again. That's the number one thing that I want. If you go onto my Spotify, it's all 90s grunge and metal, and and just loud screaming stuff that Diane actually used to hate that that I listened to. But that's where my heart is. And to have my heart there, but to also have the background of this high-level classical music really engaged me in very, very fruitful ways, where I have this idea of history and where all this stuff came from, but also the most enjoyable side, the most fun side, the most, pop sensible side of things is still there as well. And to have that balance between those two things is awesome. And the students that we work with, they tend to listen to, the pop that's on the radio and rather simple music that you can sing along to with family. And to go from, the student that's listening to Lady Gaga or whatever, because it's the thing that's on the radio the most over the course of a decade, to playing Furelise, to playing the Clementi sonatinas, is a great, great way of broadening somebody's horizons.
I'm glad you're saying this. Now you're bringing up another little story here in one of these lessons. So he'd requested, he'd been probably through half of book 3, almost to the end. And for the recital, he wanted to play a 21 Pilots song that he liked. And for those of you who don't know 21 Pilots, it's pop, rock, rap, pop, all mixed up together. Anyway, yeah. So anyway, I was kind of surprised but happy. So I wrote it out kind of in the Occupational Octaves format. And he played it for the recital. And I found it interestingly that during the lesson, one of our later lessons with you, he didn't want to play that. He wanted to go to the classical stuff, the traditional songs. So I thought, hey, I don't know the reason he didn't want to play it. But I think
well, maybe it was something like that he thought of as maybe, sort of exclusive to your relationship with him. Maybe it was special in that way for him. But now that you're moving along the program the way that you are, there is some pop music available, which I know you've seen. We have Lean on Me, we have Stand By Me, we have Imagine, The Scientist, Piano Man, a handful of really, really excellent songs, and also some supplemental classical music that he'll be able to play sooner than later, like Pachelbel's Canon in D. So the students that are using this program are getting further and further into the pop music and continuing along with the classical stuff. But what I like about what you just said actually is that you get to have your own little occupational octaves experience. You don't have to stick within the boundaries of the music that I publish. If you want to take the initiative and write your own music in this program with the colors lined up the right way, you should feel free to. And you should use whatever you put together with your students, because it's, again, more self-expression. I'm not going to be able to write up every single piece of music that exists, but if somebody can express themselves a certain way through a certain piece of music, all the power to you. Have your own pathway with this program. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Can you think of anything else, Tony?
Well, I'd rather have you write it because it's hard.
Oh, it's definitely a challenge.
And then if I do it
a lot of time,
I got to start over again.
Oh my God. You have no idea. You have no idea. Imagine writing a full curriculum. Imagine writing 400 pages of that language. It's a monstrous task. And then one of my little buddies, Shane, he's become my editor because he catches every single little mistake that I make. And he'll be playing sometimes and all of a sudden yell, "Oh my God, it should be a blue E. That should be a blue E." And he knows exactly what things should be. It all makes perfect sense to him. And it's awesome. But it's definitely a tedious task to put together all the music in an entirely new language and have to get every note and every finger and every beat lined up properly. But hey, man, the juice is worth the squeeze.
It was worth the effort, and thanks for doing all that work.
So I don't ever want to run out of music. So let me rephrase my question. As long as there's always new music for you to use, do you see an end game for you with this, or do you think that this is something that'll be part of your career moving down the road?
Forever.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah. Would you recommend this program for anyone? I mean, we work with students with certain profiles. Would you recommend this for anyone? Absolutely.
Absolutely. We have begun to look at this not only as a special needs music education program, a program that can empower occupational therapists and non-music goal-seeking program for music therapists, but we could also see it being used for DIY piano. And if you're somebody that just wants to play the piano and you've never played before, you put these rings on your fingers. You don't have to start in book 1. You could start in more challenging things in book 2 and book 3, but you could play right away with this program. And the other group of people that we would really love to see using this program more is the elderly and the aging in place population, because having a high quality of life as you age and move on down the road of life itself, it's a deep challenge. It's a very, very deep challenge, and it's what the arts are there for in a lot of ways. So one of our goals is to bring this program to many assisted living facilities and to bring it into the homes and the lives of people who are aging and who are losing certain capabilities. All we need is a piano, those rings on the fingers, and the letters are also nice and big. So if you have vision problems, the geriatric community could really be helped by this and increase the quality of life. My personal real big goal, my 2 deep down goals, and of course you can drown yourself in goals if you have too many of them and not accomplish the things that you want to actually do. But one of the next phases of Occupational Octaves, I hope end up in prisons, because I think that if prisoners who are dealing with a subpar quality of life can actually play and have an increased quality of life through the process, I think that would be a beautiful thing. And I'd love to see this program at Walter Reed one day. I'd love to see returning veterans who may be dealing with PTSD, who are always looking for mindful approaches to dealing with the crisis of mind that they will have to deal with after seeing some really severe things. I hope to bring it to Walter Reed and to other VA-style hospitals and systems, because I think that the returning war veterans of this country who have sacrificed for us to be able to be free enough to run special needs music programs are people that deserve to live a higher quality of life. And of course, keep on using the word quality of life, because that is the ultimate goal of the flow state. One of the hypotheses behind all of the flow research is that the more time one spends in a state of flow, the higher the quality of life they may experience will be. And if the individuals who, if you're dealing with PTSD, you have a million things that are popping up into your mind in a very uncontrolled way, and it's what you look to control. And it's why meditation and yoga and things like that are recommended so frequently to a population of people with PTSD. The piano flow cycle that I discuss in the paper brings on something that we call transient hypofrontality, which means a temporary reduction in the activity of your prefrontal cortex, where the most of your brain activity is shooting off from. And if you have high anxiety and high stress, that means that your prefrontal cortex is quite overactive. And it seems that this process of trying to experience a flow state by first trying to get yourself into a state of transient hypofrontality could take all that anxiety and really, really dampen it down and really, really reduce it. And when people say mindfulness, it's like, well, okay, mindfulness, what is the mind full of? Mm-hmm. And here we're talking about the instructions of music, the feedback of music, the process of musicianship. And, think about how much better a state of mind it would be for somebody dealing with PTSD to be frustrated by trying to play a song rather than to be thinking about a past that was rife with struggle. It's so much better to be working on something productive, like trying to play a song. And God, between those 3 populations, I have a lot of work ahead of me, for sure.
Yes.
The aging in place population, the prison population, and the veteran population. Well, thank you for bringing up that question. That's definitely a very meaningful one for the future of this program and what the goals are and what we're really trying to accomplish here. And if everybody understands that the real point of Occupational Octaves is a non-musical point, and it's the idea that, let's say that before this program came around, this was the level of serotonin and dopamine that would be out there in the world. If we could use Occupational Octaves to just raise that up a little tiny bit, that'll have a positive effect on millions and millions of people throughout the world. through music without having to use any, medication or any kind of drastic process. Just a real simple, holistic, sensible way to take the mind and take the body out of negative places and bring it into more positive places, even if only for a short period of time. And I think that with D and K, we've actually gotten to do that.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. All right.
And as a music therapist, with a music therapist background that I've appreciated learning so much from you in this process. I know we've talked about that before. I can still kind of take what you've done, Lee, in a music education setting and still use it, still learn. So
I'm very proud of that. Yeah,
well, so yeah.
Well, it's as I was bringing up my background before, I struggled tremendously as a student. I never got past my associate's degree. I'm a self-made. Everything that I do, I'm totally self-made, and it's been a long hill to climb to get to a point where a music therapist who is part of a group of people that I have an incredible amount of respect for would actually have something to learn from me, because I had so much to learn from you guys to get going with this entire thing. The idea of seeking out non-musical goals was not really on the forefront of things for me. I'll be honest, when I first launched Occupational Octaves, I thought of music therapy as emotional therapy through music. I didn't think of it properly. I didn't think of it with its real definition. And quite frankly, I pissed off a couple of music therapists out there because I wasn't speaking about the field properly. So I had to really, I had to zip it over here, and I had to learn what was going on here. And the idea of making non-musical gains through music, once it all set into my mind, I was like, oh, that is so beautiful. That is so incredible. That is such a special, special thing. So I'm very thankful for having an opportunity to take somebody who has the music therapy background and bring them even further along in the world of special needs music education. Because while I'm not a music therapist, you guys might not necessarily be music educators. And while you happen to be one, there are plenty of music therapists out there that are not music educators. You might not know the process of educating somebody from day one and know all the steps to bring somebody to a point where 20 years later they're independently playing the piano. You guys might not know that, but I have a lot of insight on that and how to bring special learners into that place, and how you as a music therapist in your career might be able to say, whoa, so many of the goals that I'm looking to accomplish as a music therapist, these non-musical goals, I could do it at the piano. And we could have something doubly special where we have non-musical goals and musical goals happening at the same time. We could kind of really blend together the idea of music therapy and music education, because they are two different things. They're two very, very different things. And, I'm sure you can imagine, for me, it's become a bit of a pet peeve, because I see many music schools that will hire a music therapist and say, we're offering lessons for special learners through this music therapist. And just on the outset of things, it's like, oh, problem solved.
Not always.
Nope. Sometimes.
No, definitely.
Sometimes, for sure. But you're such a valuable case for me, because you are a music educator. You're a music educator with 20 years background and a music therapist with an 18-year background. And there was a bunch that you had to learn from me. So I hope that speaks some volumes and can encourage other music therapists out there to come take this leap with me and say, okay, what does Lee know that I don't know? What could I bring to the table as yeah, well, I'd love to.
It's been so valuable. And like I said before, if I didn't have this, we'd be done by now. I honestly believe that. We would have done like maybe a year or two, and then like where do we go from here? I don't know.
Right.
The future's bright, and and yeah, they'll have that experience for the rest of their lives.
Awesome. Awesome. You can't ask for anything better than that. Really, really.
Yeah.
I was speaking. I have an awesome thing happening where there's a young lady in Florida who she's still in high school, and she volunteered at an organization for adults with intellectual disabilities, and she wanted to teach them some stuff with music. So just like with you, she did a little research. She came across Occupational Octaves, and a handful of months later, she contacts me. I get onto Skype with her and her father, and they're just talking about their experience with the program. And she's teaching these people that will mostly sit in a corner and do anything to avoid contact with other people. And they see her, they stand up, they greet her, they go over to the piano with her. They're excited to put the rings on. And her father he was like, Lee, there is no dollar amount that you could put on to experiences like that. And of course, there was a dollar amount that I charge you for training, of course. But generally speaking, the experience of getting to interact with music when you're somebody that never believed that you possibly could is so invaluable. And interacting with music can mean a million different things, but to actually play the piano and get those instructions off the pages yourself and actually perform them yourself and actually believe that if you turn the page, you'll be able to take on the next task. Very, very special thing.
Absolutely.
And, it's cool for me because, of course, I'm the creator of the program. I am an entrepreneur. I am totally looking to make sales by Occupational Octaves. Totally. However, I'm also a music teacher that tried working at the piano with individuals with special needs and had virtual failure across the board, except for the handful of cases where a student had a skill set that allowed them to actually read traditional music. And then you're just making the general adaptations that student needs. But that's on the basis that they're somebody capable of reading the traditional music in the first place. And that is not everybody. And I know in this world of special needs music education, there are some very, very, very high level people out there that will make statements like anybody could read traditional music notation. No, you're wrong if you say that. You are wrong. And I don't mean to start arguments with people, although that's definitely happened. But it is, it's not very squared up with reality to say that everybody with autism can learn to read traditional music notation. And the most easy evidence of that is that not everybody in the neurotypical world can learn to read traditional music notation. It's this really, really complicated juggling act with implicit and explicit action happening at the same time that has to be done within such a specific standard in order to have a successful experience. The idea that everybody could do it is not a valid idea, unfortunately. And I wish it could be different. I really do, because I'm a very, very proud reader of traditional music notation.
Yeah.
My purpose came out of that. My pride came out of that. If it turned out that everybody was able to do that, for me, it would be like, well, what's special about me then? And for me, I know what's special about me. It's this. And it all started with being able to read music notation and play at a high level. And that separated me from other people. Just like neurosurgeons are doing something that I can't do. That separates them from me. And they should be proud for the accomplishments that they could do, for the talents and the gifts that they have, just like I'm proud of the talent and the gift that I have at the piano. But the unfortunate reality is that if you find yourself saying, thinking, believing that anybody could learn to read traditional music notation, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. And it's great that there's another pathway, because I've gotten to really, really enjoy using this program as a special needs music educator. I still teach 25 lessons a week through this program. And in the moments that I'm teaching it, the fact that I created it has nothing to do with it. Nothing at all to do with it. All that we have is a situation where somebody that couldn't read the traditional music notes is reading music. The right notes, the right fingers, the right beats, the right formatting. We don't deal too much in accents and dynamics and phrases. We have some workarounds for that type of thing, because we acknowledge that if you need an adaptive language in the first place, there's only so many challenges that you're going to be able to really take on. So we don't delve too far into things like that, although I do use it with certain students. But
you take the music and look at it, all the information that is on there, you sort of removed. And now we can focus on the music. We don't have to worry about all these little it's overwhelming.
So confusing. Oh, it's so overwhelming.
Yeah.
It's so overwhelming. Just the idea alone that the first line and the first line function the way that they do when you're talking about a staff. Because to anybody's eye, the first line is the bottom of both parts. But the idea that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 working its way outward, and then to be able to take that premise and then turn it to the piano, where now you're, instead of going this way outward, you're going this way outward. Mm-hmm. That alone right there could scramble your brain. Then we have moments where we're going to take a clef and we're going to move it from a top staff down to a bottom staff. And all of a sudden, the top line is now the fifth line and the bottom line is now the first line, or vice versa. You have things going on where if you have a note that's made flat in the beginning of a measure and then the note repeats itself without the flat symbol in front of it, it stays flat. But then if you put one bar line there and that same note comes up again, it's all of a sudden back to being natural and not flat. You have numbers on the page where some of the numbers are talking about beats and other of the numbers are talking about fingers. You have times when
that's right.
You have times when you'll have notes that are notes that are separated from each other, and they tell you to use the thumb on one, and how are you supposed to figure out what finger comes next if the next note is 4 notes away? Well, it turns out that it's all about whatever note comes after the next note, and it might actually be about something that's 10 notes down the road that you need to get a certain pinky on this certain E in this certain spot over there. So 4 measures earlier, we're going to use a pointer finger on a B. This is not easy stuff. It's just not.
Yeah.
So
very complicated language. Yes.
Oh, very, very. And again, it's why I'm so proud that I could read it, because again, not everybody can, and it's something that I stand out from other people and have a sense of pride for, because it's something special.
Yeah. And how many times do I hear you've heard too? I can't read music, or I took piano lessons, but I can't play piano.
How many people have spent so much money, so much money, and not come out of the situation playing? I'm working with a traditionally learning student right now whose fingers are up in the black keys after 5 years of lessons. Now, he's like a tall guy and he's got very, very long fingers, but I have to say over and over, buddy, take your fingers out of the black keys. Take them out. Take them out. His posture was low. His fingers were very, very flat. 5 years of lessons. How do you not have the most basic things taken care of? And that's a very, very common story. I'm sure that you've had the experience where you take over a lesson with somebody because their original teacher left for another job in another state. And you're like, okay, so you're playing this music that's 5 years into your playing. You probably feel really good about that. But if I opened up the most basic book, I don't think you're going to get everything 100% right. And in the most basic books, Magic Keys, Dauber's, Fletcher, if you're playing 5 years in, you should be able to get everything perfect. There should be no confusion and no complication for you if you open up something like Curcio's Magic Keys. I see it all the time. All the time. So if you're one of those people that feel like you can't read music, I would definitely suggest Occupational Octaves as a stepping stone to be able to read it down the road, because at the very least, it'll help you organize all the ideas and understand what information you should be looking for. Because most people that are learning, they don't sit there and say to themselves, okay, what note do I want to play? What finger do I use? And how long am I going to hold it down for? And those are the very basic questions to ask yourself.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's where I was leading towards. So these folks that feel this way and still want to learn the piano.
Yeah, Occupational Octaves is a great way forward. Yeah. We have a free. Well, the website is going to be launched around July 17th, And when we have the new website launched, we actually have free PDFs that are now available, which does have Beethoven's Fior-Elise and Bach's Minuet in G. And we're sending a free set of rings out to anybody around the world who wants to give this program a try. And then if you have some success with it, you may want to consider grabbing a copy of one of the books. Tony, before we wrap up, did you have any questions for me?
I do have one question, and that is in your dedication or your thanks in book 1.
Mm-hmm.
You list George Carlin.
Absolutely.
Can you explain that?
Sure. So Carlin was my first real thought leader. I learned to do a lot of early thinking through Carlin, and I really, really believed him. And this one particular thing, minus all the cursing, really, really stuck out for me. In one of his performances in New York City in 1995, and unfortunately, because of Apple Watches and smartwatches and everything, this isn't going to be as relatable as it was, in 1995 when he put this out. But he said, everybody is talking about the things that make us different. Everybody's talking about the things that divide us. Different ethnicities, different races, different religions, different creeds, different economic classes, different social classes. But nobody's talking about the things that make us the same. The little factors in life that bring us all together. The things that make us the same. You ever looking at your watch and you don't know what time it is? So you look at it again and you still don't know what time it is? Then somebody says, hey, buddy, what time is it? And you say, I don't know. You ever sitting on a train and there's another train next to you and one starts to move and you can't tell which one it is? Little things like that. And he went on a whole rant about things that bring us together, things that we have in common. And when I started to do this program and I started to create the curriculum, I created a curriculum that was similar to the curriculums that I grew up teaching with, the ones that Diane empowered me with. And I would see certain things happen that in the 10, 12 years of classical lessons that I taught before ever meeting anybody with autism, I saw the same things start to happen. I would be able to tell somebody in a traditional lesson, when you get to this note over here, you're going to try to use your third finger. Don't. It's supposed to be your second finger. Even if it feels like you need to use your third, make sure you use your second. And inevitably, even with the warning, they would use their third finger. And then in occupational octaves, before it even had a name, I would have similar things, and I would watch that third finger just move over when it should be the second finger, just like I would see in a traditional lesson before that. And it's like, the things that bring us together, the little things that we have in common, that's what George Carlin was talking about. And it just made me believe in this idea right away, because I started to see certain mistakes that the traditional learners using traditional notation would make in special needs lessons using this adaptive material. And that's why George Carlin is thanked in book 1. Sorry.
Okay.
Well, Tony, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time. Also, how much I appreciate your efforts, because I always respect people that go out and search for ways to improve on whatever they're doing, especially when it comes to empowering special learners, especially when it comes to empowering people through music. So I'm really thankful to have gotten to meet you, to get to work with you, and to continue having a professional relationship together. It's really great to have you using occupational octaves, and I'm very proud that somebody of your background is having a successful experience with it. Thank you very, very much for your time and your efforts.
You're very welcome, and I'm so glad that we're able to do this.
Me too.
So, yeah.
Okay. Hope your next lesson is as successful as the previous ones have been.
Thank you.